Good afternoon, readers. It's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf.
And Rod from Scully Dangling About the Books.
We've got a bit of catching up to do in our project to discuss a modern book every month. We've read the books, but we haven't done the discussion.
Yeah, so each month we're reading quite a contemporary novel, something that's come out in the last sort of year or so.
Yeah.
And
January, we read The Borrowed Hills,
which was great.
which was fantastic.
Interesting.
Yeah, about
Very
rural crime
memorable.
and sheep.
February we read Bellies by Nicola Dinan. And
it's a completely different. Both of them have taken us to parts of English society that we don't have a lot of personal experience with, but completely different areas.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we're finally in April catching up, talking about our February book.
Yes.
But that's fine. And Bellies was published in 2024, so it's kind of
very up to the minute.
In the autumn of 2024, I think, even. So it's pretty up to date. And I was intrigued by it because it sounded like, it was telling a story that I thought I hadn't heard before.
Yes. Yeah. So briefly, it tells the story of a relationship between two people who meet as students. Tom and Ming. And I don't know how far we want to go in terms of, because I think it's the thing that's mainly known about the book, but I didn't know it when I started out reading it.
But it's in all the sort of, it's on the blurb, I think.
Yes, because I just clicked. Ross told me to read it, so I read it. I'm very obedient when it comes to reading these contemporary fiction books.
But so they get together as a gay couple, but then Ming realizes that actually what she wants to be is a woman, and that what she is a trans woman, and gradually transitions, and that the sort of first half of the book is about the impact of that on their relationship, because Tom loves Ming very much. Yeah,
and there's so much care in the book for each other and for for trying to be supportive and understanding, but the challenges that presents to both of them,
because Tom's tried going out with a woman. He went out with Sarah, who we also meet in the book, and that didn't
work for him. And he's somebody who's just come to terms with his own sexuality as being very definitely a gay young man.
He's attracted to men.
Yes. So the progress of their relationship is sort of what is documented in the book, and then at a certain point, then we see the aftermath, I suppose.
Aftermath of the impact that has on their relationship and how they kind of
move on from
that. And we I think we'll try and initially talk about the book without spoilers, and then when we're going to start talking about the latter part of the book and the ending, we'll say, because it is the kind of book. Sometimes we read books where we say, well, that you can't really spoil this story. Whereas I'd say this is definitely a book where
I benefited from the sort of the element of surprise of I really didn't see that coming kind of
at several points in
and I do think that was one of the things that was quite well done in this. I felt that as books go, it felt it felt like real life, and it's not. It's very definitely not like autofiction or something like that, but it when I say it felt like real life, I don't mean that it felt like the author was writing down their own story. Although she says in the kind of post-book material, she does have a lot of similarities with Ming. What I mean is events felt realistic. Events felt like the kinds of things that would happen in real life.
Yes, as opposed to
everything fitting together very neatly in a story type way.
Yes. So at the earliest part of the book, they're students and their friends are students, and you've got Tom's best mate Rob, who's a straight man, who's a sort of more sort of sporty type, but very.
And they live together, and they've got all these little groups that are living together, that they're all friends together.
And Ming's actually one of his flatmates is Sarah, who's Tom's ex-girlfriend, but Sarah's now come
Also
out as
come out-
lesbian. So
Yeah.
and this is it's a very witty book, and there's there's quite a funny line about how, you know, like Tom realizes he's gay, splits up with Sarah becomes lesbian, and then it's like, and then suddenly Sarah's like the expert on all things sort of queer, you know. And Tom's a bit productive. So is that sort of for me, I'm not. I think that I don't particularly want to read books now, or I'm not particularly engaged by books that are about that sort of young people coming of age, studenty, you know, like I really loved the studenty books, because it really took me back to me at that age. And there's sort of, when you have like a friendship group, there's also sometimes there's also sexual relationships in, you know, that switch around, and
and people kind of trying to work out
relationships, and are you going to get together with that one or not, or, you know,
people trying to work out what's acceptable
they are
in adult relationships. I think like there's something that goes on between Rob and a young woman, and it's like, you know, is he being inconsiderate? Like, he's a kind of a nice bloke, but, you know, is he treating her fairly? And it's about people kind of learning the rules of relationships. So it puts Tom and Ming's relationship into the context of a lot of other relationships where everyone's puzzling things out. So in a sense, that kind of obscures the issues that they then have later on, because it's all part of this whole, well, we're all just, none of us know what we're doing. Yeah,
we're all kind of trying to sort of be nice, but also we're young and want to have fun, and you know, do we want to be committed? So, and all of that worked really well, and then
I felt like it was very warmly portrayed.
But also, as you say, it had that slightly random quality that real life has.
And in a sense that's also in terms of the scenes that Dinan chooses to focus on, and sometimes the scene that maybe is the more important scene she skips, and you kind of hear about the most significant events from a different angle, or from you know, from the perspective of a few weeks afterwards, which I thought was a very interesting choice, but it did work.
Yes, you could imagine it as a film quite easily as well.
I suppose so. I hadn't thought of it like that, but I think you probably could.
And you know, they're in London, and all of that, and I suppose one of the other things that then made sense of was, sort of Ming's gradual shift in understanding of herself.
And we first meet Ming in drag. Like, she's always been somebody like as in. But
then Tom was in drag too. It was like a drag night, you know.
So like we get, as readers, get a hint there. Or a bit of foreshadowing, I suppose. But Tom doesn't see it that way, because he sees it as like, this is what we're all trying these things. And
but and then Ming gradually she does sort of small shifts, and Tom tries to go with it, you know. So like there's a moment when Ming talks about like maybe wanting to get sort of is it electrolysis, hair removal,
permanent hair removal,
laser hair removal, that's it. And because it's so hard having to shave so much, because she doesn't want to have like a 5 o'clock shadow, you know, and Tom sort of is sort of saying, oh, but you don't have to, you know, I like you as you are, sort of thing. And Ming is upset because Ming doesn't like herself as she is, because she's, you know,
in the process of about transitioning,
you know. But Tom's sort of saying, but if you said you wanted to lose weight, I'd say, but you're fine as you are, you know. He's sort of it's not like he's trying to stop her, control her, or, you know.
And it's like, yes, normally that would be a supportive thing to say to somebody,
you're fine as you are.
You know, I love you as you are, and all of that. But it doesn't work in that context.
So Tom's sort of struggling to then, as you know, Ming becomes more distinctly sure that, you know, with the direction they're going, like Tom's still trying not to be transphobic, but yet is thinking, but this isn't the person that I was attracted to. This is the person that I fell in love with, in the sense of I care about them as a person and their character and their, but physically,
the physical relationship is where things fall down. I suppose.
Fall down, yeah.
And I think it's interesting because it's interesting to write so carefully about this relationship dynamic, because it does happen, and for some couples it's something that works, for some couples it's something that doesn't work, and it's, I suppose, it's a process of exploring that form of, the routes that things can go down.
But that's not the only thing that it explores, in that Ming is a writer and a playwright, and Ming writes about their relationship and their relationship becoming
how it does
difficult and problematic. And there's a whole
there's a whole strand in the book, even from the start, from before Ming writes about this, about art and queer art, or plays, but writings, how you can put these things into words and create a kind of a I'm losing the train of thought.
What's okay to portray from your life and the life of people around you in art, in literature, in plays,
but also how Ming is wanting to write something that speaks to her generation and people with her experiences. And like at the start, one quote that I highlighted was like the first play that she works on, she's like, Tom's asking her about it on like when they first meet, and he's like, oh, how did it go, this play about I think it's gay virgins, was how she summarized it. And Ming says, well, straight people loved it, but gay people thought it was boring. And it's like, yes, like I'm kind of like trying to work out how to write something that's true to me and not quite managing. So then obviously then increasingly kind of draws on her personal experiences,
makes her writing more autobiographical.
And the authenticity means that it does gain traction. She does do well as a playwright, increasingly.
But how is that for the people that you end up writing about? And that's a subject that I find quite intriguing. It's intriguing when you like at the moment it's People April. I'm reading memoirs and so on, and to what extent is it okay to sort of expose your friends or your relatives, or when you're writing about yourself, because you write from your perspective and they don't get to have a voice, they don't get to sort of say what their perspective on events is. What we get in the book is we get a swap of perspectives.
Yes, we do. So we get to see things from Tom's point of view and Ming's point of view. And I would say that when Ming's point of view, it starts at Tom's. And when we first got Ming's, I was quite surprised and I just got into Tom's voice. I quite like Tom. But it does work because you see, I think, she balances it very well, because you see the good in both of them.
Yes.
But also the problems from both sides.
Yes. Oh, yes. Like neither of them behaves perfectly in this situation.
Neither of them behaves perfectly, but neither of them really behaves badly. They're both behave in just a very human way.
It's very human, which brings back to that thing about this is a book that feels like life.
But going back to one of the things I was going to say about sort of queer art and queer writing, Dinan writes again in this after book material that she, at the time that she was writing this book and it was nearly ready to send to be published, another book was published, and that Detransition Baby, which we read last year or the year before,
a couple of years ago.
And Dinan said she read about this book Detransition Baby coming out, and she was like, oh no, somebody else has written a book about a trans woman and that's got an Asian character. That means that there's no place for my book. But actually the two books are completely different, and when she read that, she realised actually there's not only one space for this book, and like there's not only one point of view to share in this story.
And yes, not only you can have more than one novel that happens to have a main character that is trans and Asian.
I thought that was interesting that she'd had that feeling of. So yeah, part of what Ming is doing is creating that space for her art, but it kind of tramples on. To an extent, tramples on Tom along the way.
In a way. But having, because Troy Peters that wrote Detransition Paper's got a new book out now, which I will read. Stag Hunt, it's called. It's a novella and then 3 short stories put together. But I would say that if you were comparing Bellies with Detransition Baby, in some ways, like Bellies is a slightly gentler book.
Yeah, I would absolutely
say.
I mean, they're completely different.
Just
they're
very different.
Very different. Detransition Babies, like, there's a lot of really passionate stuff about sort of motherhood and so on, and I guess Bellies is more about
friendship and love.
Yeah, and yes. Friendship, definitely about friendship.
Yes.
And there's a quote towards the end that I highlighted, but I haven't brought it to say that's about how the narratives of self and how we construct our narratives of ourselves.
Yes.
And I think that's really what the book's about. It's about Ming and Tom constructing different narratives of themselves and working out who they are.
Yeah. Yes, because Tom goes into a career that really doesn't fit him at all. But it's like he has this narrative that he has to do this and be successful and make money. And, so yes, they both do this thing where they're sort of creating different versions of themselves.
Yeah.
I suppose. I thought we talked a lot about Tom and Ming, but some of the other characters in the book, the sort of minor, the other, are really successful for me. Yeah. I loved Cindy, Ming's stepmother.
Oh, stepmother, yes.
In Kuala Lumpur. She was, and then when she visits in New York, she was a brilliant character.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we haven't mentioned is that Ming is Malaysian. She grew up in Kuala Lumpur, and one of the difficult aspects for her of deciding to openly transition is the knowledge that she can never go home. Yes. And that's something that she, Dinan, weaves in quite gently. It's never done melodramatically, but just the gentle, consistent point of like Cindy saying, "Oh, come home," and she's like, "You know that I can't." No, because so the impact that has on sort of her life going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob is a brilliant character. Cass, their friend who's got an eating disorder, another
also done really well.
Yeah, really. There's a sort of a thoughtful subtlety and sensitivity in the way all the characters are written, I'd say.
I think I need to wrap up here because I need to run upstairs.
Okay. So, would we recommend it as a book?
Definitely, yeah.
Well worth your time to read. An interesting story, well written, and with some very sort of funny, witty, sharp bits of dialogue in there too.
Okay. So, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching.